Good evening. It's Thursday, May 23rd, 2024, 5 p.m. Call to order a special workshop meeting of the Unified Development Ordinance. Item A, please take the roll call, sir.
Mayor Nelson.
Here.
Commissioner Shago.
Here.
Commissioner Haley.
Here.
City Engineer Morrow.
Here.
Alderwoman Davies is excused. Commissioner Leung is excused. And Commissioner Specht is expected to arrive shortly.
Excellent. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to item B, as in boy, Unified Development Ordinance UDO Rewrite Task Force. Introductory session to the UDO draft with planning staff and project consultants. Levine Associates and Birchline Planning LLC. Mr. Rodriguez, are you driving this?
Martinez.
I'm sorry, Mr. Martinez, are you driving this?
I will just introduce Ruben Shell from House Levine, who is here to do a presentation on the kind of a reintroduction of the project since we started and resumed the project recently. So I will yield to Ruben.
Thank you, Regulo, and thank you, task force members, for joining us here this evening. I will share a screen. Thank you. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, task force members. It's good to be back here with you all for the Unified Development Ordinance rewrite and this introductory session for the reboot of the project here. My name's Ruben Shell, planner with House Levine. Been working on the project for a couple years now. I'm joined online here by my colleagues, Jackie Berg with House Levine, our practice lead, as well as J.B. Hines with Birchline Planning. Also been working on the project. So we're looking forward to working with you all as we move forward and work towards finishing up the UDO update and rewrite. So we'll take a look at the purpose and agenda for this evening. Really, as Regulo mentioned, this is an informative session as we get back into things for the UDO rewrite. We'll take a look at the scope of work as a whole and the different steps in the process so far. Really tonight we want to reaffirm goals and priorities for the project and hear from you all on really the big picture priorities the city should think about and to reaffirm all of those types of issues. We'll provide a high-level overview of the draft UDO to date and highlight some of the major changes, and we'll provide some opportunity for discussion and questions. So as far as agenda goes tonight, we'll start off by taking a look at that scope of work, move into the overview, and then cover next steps. Just a reminder as well, the task force, this is meant as an advisory body for the UDO rewrite, formed as part of this process itself, really meant for you all to provide input and guidance for what's best for Franklin in the UDO rewrite and provide input and policy direction throughout the process. And this is just a reminder, we'll stop periodically during the overview presentation tonight for questions as we go. So starting out, here's a look at the project goals as we began the process in 2021 and the scope of work that we've taken to date. Some of the goals that the city had in its RFP for this project back in 2021, implementing the comprehensive plan and the vision that the city has in that policy document, making the UDO
Ruben, before we move on, would you please double check that your microphone is on? Your audio is a bit choppy on our end. It seems like it may be coming through a different microphone.
Is this any better?
Yes, that is much better. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, is there a draft supposed to be in this packet? Council likes to argue, he's right. Always. Lead with the truth, Mike.
In the packet, there is only the cover memo and the proposed zoning map and all the draft. We send it in a link to plan commission members, and it's available upon request. If you need us to print one, then we can print one for you.
Council comments?
Yeah, and I think the entire UDO is available online to the draft on the project website. So if there's no other comments on the scope of work and the process so far, we'll cover the UDO articles here and highlight some of the major updates and changes here. So the proposed UDO is divided into 12 different articles that you see up on the screen here, really meant to create a pretty user-friendly format by presenting some of the more broader information towards the beginning of the document, things like districts and uses that are really more commonly used and that developers and applicants will want to see towards the beginning of the process, towards the beginning of the process of the document, and then getting more specific as we go into development standards and procedural issues and definitions towards the beginning of the or the end of the document. So that's really what this article structure is intended to do here. So we'll go through one by one the articles here and discuss some of the changes. So Article 2, Establishment of Districts. This really establishes the city's base zoning districts and describes their purpose and intent. Just outlines all the districts that the city has and some rules as well for interpretation of the zoning map. Some of the feedback that we heard and took into consideration on this article is some of the feedback that we heard up front is that the city has a lot of residential zoning districts, particularly R3 through R6, and that they really serve very similar purposes and have very similar types of development existing and that are allowed in those districts, and that the city wanted to think about ways to consolidate or streamline some of those it's many single-family residential districts. So in the map that you all have, we've worked on consolidating some of these districts, and it really is not intended to change the type of development that would be allowed in those single-family districts, but just make them more streamlined and easier for, it makes the map easier to interpret and the ordinance easier for applicants to understand. So we'll go into much more detail on the map in future meetings as well, but highlighting some other things about the district. There's a few other map cleanup items that we addressed as we drafted Article 2 here. The Countryside Estate District, this really encompasses only one parcel there, so consolidating that with some of the other residential districts as well, we took into consideration. We heard. I'll keep going as well. We heard some about the floodplain districts and did some work to match up those with the FEMA floodplain geographies.
Good evening and welcome. I'll put it on record. 5:15 p.m. Commissioner Speck has arrived. Council?
I don't know if we're going to questions yet, but I think I raised the issue a year or two ago with all these consolidations, et cetera. It sounds to me as, in effect, existing properties are being rezoned, and I did not see how that is accomplished by just amending the zoning ordinance code, and that there would have to be a notice to all the properties being rezoned and public hearing thereon. And I think the only response I heard was, well, that's not done in Illinois or something. But it's a year or two or more ago that I heard that. But that's still on the list. If you're changing all the zoning for a property, I don't know how that's not a rezoning, even though it's basically the same. You know,
Yeah, I'll jump in. We are intending that this would be a rezoning, a map amendment. So we are planning on going through the required public notice and public process for that.
Okay,
Mhm.
good. That probably ought to be located at Franklin High School or something because of the numbers of properties that would be noticed on it.
Mhm.
Room for attendance at meetings.
We also have a lot of public outreach that we have planned to help inform the community, let them know about what changes are being proposed and why. These major changes really aren't meant to change what people can do with their residential property or really with any property in the city in general. It's really just meant to help streamline the code and make it a much more useful tool for the city moving forward. So we're very hopeful that we'll be able to communicate that to residents and business owners and property owners in Franklin well before the public hearing, so that we do not have, a large crowd of folks who are misunderstanding the proposal at the public hearing itself.
Yeah, we
Just want to add to that, in the next step, before the adoption, in the project schedule, includes a public hearing, a public open house, so we can get that follow all the requirements that you mentioned.
Excellent.
Yep. So seeing that through the public hearing process is definitely something that we're anticipating. And we, as Jackie mentioned there, we have some additional scope steps, informational brochures, and outreach events that we're planning to really present some of these changes to the public and really convey the intent behind some of the map change.
Just to clarify that, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to interrupt them and ask.
So continuing on with Article 2 here, we heard up front that streamlining some additional districts, the C1 Conservancy District and the OL Office District. Some of these districts are really, can be taken care of or treated as overlays currently and can really be handled and administered much more easily as base districts with more objective standards in the UDO text. So that's something we've worked towards in the draft here, is to remove some of the less used districts and basically overlays that exist in the code today, the C1, the OL office overlay, and rezone some of those based on existing use, and to really create more objective standards in the code for design.
Just an additional comment on that, about the C1 district. That is a district that exists currently in the map, in the zoning map, but it doesn't exist in the zoning text. So that's why it's proposed to be eliminated. And if there are questions about the protection of natural resources, those resources will be protected under the Article 7 natural resource protection. So any kind of development proposal comes forward, it requires natural resource protection
Yeah, and good point. And continuing on, similar theme with the South 27th Mixed Use District specific standards. There's a lot of really lengthy design standards there that we've worked to sort of shorten up and condense in some more objective ways in the new UDO. And just as a reminder, we'll in future meetings be going over much more detail about the map as well. In future meetings we'll really provide a lot of detail on the zoning map itself. So Article 3, this is district-specific standards. The intent here is really to establish the bulk and dimensional standards and allowed uses within each of the zoning districts established in Article 2. So the districts are really established in that structure, 6 different subsections that you see up on the right there. So we'll cover some of the main themes here with this article. We really heard that the UDO's existing use list that's based on the Standard Industrial Classifications Code is really somewhat cumbersome to use. It's really lengthy, makes the process of rendering like use determinations really complicated. And so collapsing some of those categories into a little simpler, easier to administer categories like general retail rather than bakery products and a myriad of other sort of sub-retail categories has been sort of a focus here. Again, not really changing the uses that are allowed themselves, but just making the document much easier to interpret and to determine which types of uses are allowed.
That's worth the price of admission in itself.
SIC code has
Been.
been no longer in effect nationwide for what, 20 years, 30 years?
Just an example, the current code, for example, for educational facilities has elementary school, middle school, high school, et cetera, while the new code only says educational facilities. So it kind of simplified uses.
So we're not going the NAICS route?
Yeah, and really just simplifying and collapsing the types of uses that are referred to rather than changing the type of use necessarily that's allowed, being the goal there. Yeah, we heard that the UDO really contains a lot of special uses that have to go through a really extensive approval process, and that the city wanted to, we heard that up front from stakeholders, and that the city wanted to look for ways to streamline the process for some of these uses where possible. So we've looked at establishing a little more concrete standards for uses that might have external impacts, things like outdoor dining, establishing standards for those, and then maybe streamlining the process. As we get into Article 4 and Article 5, that regulate for that offsite impacts, how those uses might impact neighbors or the community at large. So that's something we'll look to you all on for more input as we get more and cover that more in future meetings. But streamlining the special use process for certain uses where possible, a big theme in Article 3 here.
One example is multifamily residential projects that even in the multifamily zoning district needs to go through the special use process. In the new code, multifamily residential is a permitted use in the multifamily residential district.
All right.
Right. Came on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the norm?
It's pretty typical, these days to have permitted by right in multifamily districts, and there's often some standards for how those types of uses can look and sort of the design of those that we've worked into Article 5 as well, too. So getting at some of the aesthetic and visual impacts as well.
Thank you.
So yeah, more on Article 3 here. We heard that the city wanted to consider some residential density bonuses along 27th Street where there's some transit existing there, so allowing a little greater building height and perhaps some exceptions from bulk and dimensional standards like setbacks in instances where a developer might be providing affordable housing along 27th Street is something that we've worked into the draft of Article 3, and again, we'll take a look at closer in future meetings here. But definitely wanted to highlight that, heard that it was a priority up front in the process. Clarifying lot coverage and impervious surface standards was a priority we heard about, so establishing impervious surface coverage standards for all districts and really clarifying the definition that it would include all impervious surface on a lot, whether that's a building or otherwise. We heard that the UDO, the existing standards, really contain a very complicated set of development standards, so looking for ways to streamline some of those where the same intent can be achieved with less standards is something that we've looked to address. So streamlining or removing some complicated regulations like FAR, net density, and living area per dwelling unit that are either, not necessarily, or that can be addressed in other areas of the UDO where we might be controlling for density, or that are difficult to apply to a certain site, like net density. We've worked to streamline some of those regulations. So moving along, Article 4, this is use-specific standards. This establishes regulations and standards for certain uses that are allowed under the UDO to control for off-site impacts, things like noise, traffic, and aesthetic concerns. And so that article is really broken down by use category. There's different standards established based on residential uses versus commercial uses there. So really getting back at streamlining the process here and streamlining special uses is where use-specific standards can come into play. So establishing regulations for things like traffic, noise, and aesthetics where we can. Things like stronger buffering standards for, say, vehicle-related uses where they might have an impact on a neighboring use. When there's objective standards for those certain uses baked in, we've kind of looked at where those uses can be allowed under a little more of a streamlined process. Making them a little easier to develop. So again, we'll go more in future meetings into detail on use-specific standards there, but that's really the intent of the article here. So moving along, Article 5, General Development Standards. This contains the city's regulations for physical development and provision of amenities like parking, landscaping, screening, fencing, and building design. So those are kind of organized topically within this article here, as you can see up on the right there. At the beginning of the process, we heard that the city wanted to explore replacing some of its parking maximums that have resulted in an oversupply of parking in some corridor areas here. Replacing some of those parking minimums that have resulted in a parking oversupply in corridor areas with parking maximums to sort of getting at some of that oversupply over time there. So That is included in the draft there. New parking maximum standards established based on national best practice features there to get at that issue. We heard that design standards should be considered to regulate site aspects like outdoor storage. So we've established some more objective standards for site features like trash and recycling receptacles, mechanical units, loading docks. Those all have more objective standards that apply across zoning districts there. Again, getting at the issue of streamlining the process where possible when the city can agree on how these things should look and have objective standards in the UDO for them. We heard that multifamily residential uses really have to follow the special use process, and it can get really time consuming. So establishing some objective standards in the UDO for how they should look. There's some new standards in there for townhome, multifamily, and mixed use and non-residential development. They're flexible standards. They can be met by applicants in a variety of ways, but still ensure that the city is getting baseline in terms of quality and aesthetic appearance. And those standards regulate a variety of features there, exterior building cladding materials, facade articulation, roof lines, building entrances, the like. They're really getting at appearance. Similar point of feedback here. We heard that the planned unit development procedure is really the norm for multifamily development. So getting at some of that with the objective design standards to hopefully streamline some of the process where possible. We heard that the UDO contains standards for noise, odor, vibrations, glare, which the city wanted to think about removing and placing those in the municipal code. So that's really something we're undertaking as part of the expanded scope of work. At this point in the process here is thinking about how the city's noise regulations can be streamlined between they exist currently in the UDO and in the municipal code. So thinking about how those can be streamlined between those different sections of the city's ordinances and to make them as enforceable and objective as possible moving forward. That's really something that's not addressed in the draft that's online so far, but that we're undertaking at this point in the process. And we'll look to review with you all in future meetings. So we heard some feedback too on fencing standards, including the required setbacks, materials, and location. Looking at revising those to ensure consistent visual appearance throughout the community there. We've worked on revising fencing standards to limit fence height in street side yards, location and easements, and to limit some materials such as chain link. So we'll revisit this when we highlight the article more in future meetings in this development standards article.
Could you say that again?
So if project will require, for example, 20 parking spaces, so the new code will require that 5% is going to be one off-street bicycle parking.
Okay.
Yep. So
What if two people bike together?
Exactly. Do you have a tandem requirement?
That's the rate that we have in the current draft, but that could be revised to
Good call,
a
Counselor.
higher rate.
Good exactly say one parking space would be just for bicycles? Right, I mean, is that,
No,
5% of the vehicular parking spaces provided.
well, you're basically saying you have to just put a bike rack somewhere.
Yep, so bicycle parking provided in proportion to vehicle parking is a feature in there. Article 6, this is sign standards. This establishes all the city's regulations for signage. So establishing clear permit procedures for permanent and temporary signage. The new UDO chapter here features a sort of user-friendly table showing which types of signs are allowed by district and which permit process they have to follow for approval there. So making that hopefully user-friendly to navigate. We've reviewed the sign types for compliance with the Reed versus Gilbert case, 2015 Supreme Court case that prohibits, content neutrality there. So all the new sign types and designations in this article are really based on the physical construction, and you could make a determination on sign type based on the physical construction without reading the sign's message at all. We've removed some complex allowances for signs and replaced them with simple measures that depend on lot frontage. So the amount of signage total on a lot would depend on the amount of frontage on exterior street-facing lot lines, though there now, making it just a more simpler standard to administer. And then there's more allowances for height and area that depend on those different types of signs there to regulate appearance throughout the community there. So Article 7, Natural Resource Standards. This is all the city's regulations regarding protection of natural resources, reorganized and reformatted here. And I can just go over a few of the highlights here. Review up front, we heard the review process for mitigation is uncertain and lengthy there. And of course, JB, any areas that you want to chime in here on natural resources, definitely feel free to.
Sure. A couple of things. We had heard that the process was not as clear as it could be in terms of the required content and analysis. That the standards were well intentioned on preventing unnecessary clearing, but resulted in things like not having authority to clear invasives or diseased trees. And that could be changed to both encourage invasives removal and to facilitate resource restoration. So some significant changes. Staff would be specifically authorized to review the natural resource protection and mitigation plans for completeness and for their content and their conformance to the code. We are proposing to and have started drafting a mitigation guide that would take a lot of the technical direction out of the zoning and instead have the zoning ask for performance under certain criteria, but a lot of the nitty-gritty details of how to mitigate for what resources will go in a mitigation guide. And then establishing standards for allowing invasives removal or planting without having to go through a full natural resource protection plan, which is cumbersome and can be very expensive. So those are some of the significant changes. Overall, it's intended to reorganize the requirements so that it's clearer for both applicants, staff, and then Plan Commission or Council reviewing special exceptions.
Yep, so that's a good overview of the changes there. So, and we'll go into more detail when we highlight this in future meetings there. So next, Article 8, subdivision standards. This establishes all the city standards that apply to development and platting of land and location and design of streets, other public improvements that have to be provided at that time there. So the structure of this article is broken up into sort of 10 different subsections up on the right there. So really getting at the organization of the document, we've worked at removing some subjective provisions in the subdivision standards. We've heard that, just getting back at the feedback that the UDO is somewhat lengthy now and that there's some overlapping standards that are not always easy to interpret. Removing some of the subjectivity in this chapter where they can be, the intent is really covered pretty well in other articles like development standards, Article 5 there. We've worked on the update to this article. We heard that the city wanted to consider some smaller, narrower road options in new platted subdivisions. So first tabularizing and organizing all the types of improvements that are required by street type in sort of user-friendly tables there has been a feature of this article. And then establishing some new street options for local serving streets that have narrower right-of-way and pavement dedication requirements there is incorporated into the text in this article here. We heard that there's some difficulty with enforcement of some of the erosion control provisions in the UDO now, and that they're not organized in the most user-friendly way there. So, and some of this is in the municipal code. Currently, some of this is in the UDO in this existing subdivision standards. So we've worked to really relocate some of those standards from the draft subdivision standards here into the municipal code. And again, just making it easier, the ordinance easier to understand and administer for staff and applicants. So Article 9, this is administrative standards and procedures. This covers standards for administration of the UDO and really outlines the city's different types of zoning applications and processes here. So this article is organized into 13 different subsections that you see up on the right, generally starting with some of the more administrative procedures towards the beginning of this article, and then moving into more discretionary processes towards the end. So some things we heard up front on this related to administrative standards and procedures. The UDO references a historic preservation commission that really doesn't exist in Franklin today, so we've removed a lot of that text from the UDO just to reflect how the city operates today. We heard that site plan review, including the situations requiring plan commission review and those that can be approved administratively by staff, should be clarified. So we've really worked to create different applicability standards to sort of differentiate the situations that require site plan review and those that require just zoning permit review in the text of this article here, just to make it straightforward which types of processes apply to different situations. We've heard that there's often pretty extensive review processes required for use changes and small modifications, and that these should be allowed through more of an administrative process. So we've worked to create new procedures for amendments to previously approved site plans, conditional use permits, and plan developments. So differentiating major from minor development or amendments to approved plans in the situations that would apply as minor amendments that could be approved more administratively by staff as opposed to ones that have to go back through the process there is a big feature and sort of a highlight of this article.
Whatever we can do to help streamline that. This is basically 180 foot over. I mean, I don't know. We for sure need to fix a lot is broke, but good.
Good example. Yeah, we heard retaining the decisions that have the potential to generate impacts on the neighborhood or at the city or to the city at large should still be made by Common Council to provide opportunities for public input. So retaining most of the city's discretionary processes for conditional use, plan development, and just refining which types of situations qualify for those different procedures there is sort of the approach that we've taken in Article 9. So Article 10, this is related to plan development standards and procedures, just devoted to that single procedure and establishing that in its own article. And again, we really heard that the PDD process is used frequently and that it's kind of the norm for certain types of development in the city, and that the city wanted to think about updating the UDO to make sure that it's not overused. So a lot of the updates that we've described to some of the previous articles, making some of the use categories, bulk and dimensional standards, and establishing some objective design standards for different types of development can go a long way in creating certainty in the process and simplifying the procedure there. And the intent with some of that is to make it more streamlined so that not necessarily all types of proposals would have to go through the PDD process necessarily. So a lot of the changes that we've described in some of the previous articles would hopefully get at some of that feedback there. We've reworked the way some of this text reads so that the PDD process will be more of an overlay tied to the base district. So when an applicant comes in under the plan development process, most of the base district standards would still function and apply. This new overlay would give the city the ability to grant sort of exceptions and deviations from those base district standards when an applicant is providing certain benefits to the community at large that you all deem to add some value to the community and be above and beyond the base zoning standards. And again, getting at the amendment process for approved plan development, creating a major and minor amendment process for approved applications there, another highlight of the chapter. From here, Article 11, non-conforming building structures and uses. This article really contains the provisions that govern non-conforming building structures, lots, and uses. That's those types of situations that don't conform with the existing UDO standards, but were established prior to its enactment. And we've really carried forward most of the existing standards there, reviewed them for compliance with state statute, and just reformatted them. The idea with this article is to allow those types of uses to continue as they are, even though they're non-conforming. But when they're either eliminated or replaced on a given property, then when that property is developed again, it would have to come into conformance with the new UDO. Article 12, definitions. This defines all the terms and terminology used throughout the UDO. So this is broken down alphabetically into different subsections. All definitions are just arranged based on alphabetical order here at the end of the document, so that this kind of serves as a reference for the rest of the UDO. Up front, we heard that the UDO is missing certain terms throughout there. Things like building story, lot coverage, accessory buildings versus accessory structures. So we've really worked to define all of those terms and used make sure that there's an objective definition in this article for all of those terms of art used through the UDO. So that is a look at the draft document that you all have and that we've drafted to date here. From here, I'll just go out and outline some next steps and meeting dates, unless there's any questions at this time on the draft UDO. So from here, like we mentioned earlier in the meeting, there's a full draft of the UDO. We'll be reviewing the sort of series of articles in future meetings in greater depth and sort of highlighting some of the changes and taking a look at some of the updated text in more detail in future meetings. On June 20th, we have a closer look at the zoning districts, the zoning map that is in the draft. The uses, we'll take a look at some of the use simplifications in there, some of the ways that the dimensional standards were simplified, and just focus on those articles 2 through 4 in that June 20th meeting. On August 8th, we're looking at reviewing a draft of the noise ordinance and performance standards. We'll have more progress and be able to share a more detailed update at that point in the process there, and how some of that streamlining between the municipal code and the UDO will look at that August 8th meeting. On September 19th, we'll be going into...
Excuse me. That's different from what's in front of us here as to the dates. This says August 6th and September 20th. Can we get verification on which ones those are?
Correct. Those are correct.
Those are the real dates?
Yep.
6th is the Tuesday, I noticed that.
That's what I'm wondering.
August 8th, that's correct, and the September 19th.
Yep. Before
August
and-
8th and September 19th are the real dates.
And another clarification that the June 20th meeting will start at 5:30 because there is a conflict with the CDA.
Let the record reflect 5:56 p.m. Alderwoman Day has arrived. So could you say that again, Regulo?
The meeting on
Okay,
Start at 5:30.
5:30. Any others will start at 5. August 8th and September 19th. Excellent.
And on the September 19th, we'll take a look at development standards, sign standards, and subdivision standards, and the updates to those articles in more detail there.
Okay. Since our meeting starts in like 2 minutes, can we get a motion to adjourn because we have to redo the whole thing over for the regular meeting of plan? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. We have first and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.